Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I'm sure you've noticed things are a little slow right now because we're coming off of one heck of a religious weekend, which had not just one, but two major religious holidays. I'm talking Passover and Easter. In fact, Passover is still going on, and I believe for some people, so is Easter, which is why things have continued to be slow, starting on Friday all the way through today. But still, I found some stories for us to discuss, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about them down below. Now, the first story is about the Jurassic World franchise, and some of you are concerned. Why is that? Well, that's because Jurassic World 2 isn't even out yet, but Universal seems to have already shifted its focus to promoting Jurassic World 3. First, they gave it a release date a couple of months ago, I'd say maybe a couple of weeks ago is a better representation of how long it's been, but June 11th, 2021. And then, just the end of last week, they announced that Colin Trevorrow, who has plenty of time on his hands now that he was kicked off of Star Wars Episode 9, he's available. Well, he will return to direct in the franchise that made him an A-list director in the first place, and then he never left as a producer. He is a producer on Jurassic World 2. And if you follow him on Twitter, as I do, he promotes it quite a bit. More than Universal does. And, some of you might be like, well, it's interesting. When Colin Trevorrow was first signed to Star Wars, everyone was very excited about it. But I think that as time has passed, I think people are less and less excited about Colin Trevorrow overall. I think he's an okay director. I think, I think he did get the Jurassic franchise back on track with the help of a lot of other people, of course. But, he was at the center of that storm. And I think that Jurassic World is actually not a bad movie once you come to terms with the fact that it's not as good as the first Jurassic Park. Many of us had anticipated that it would be due to a very good ad campaign, and then of course the sad reality was that it's only the second best movie in the franchise, and the second best movie in the Jurassic franchise is still pretty darn good. Now, speaking of ad campaigns, I would think that this right now what's happening is that Universal is likely using the time-honored Hollywood strategy of talking up the next installment of a franchise to get audiences excited about the installment that's about to hit theaters. Universal in particular does this themselves all the time. For instance, they do it a lot with the Fast and Furious movies. And the idea is that as we've discussed before, but just for those of you who don't remember or aren't familiar with it, what happens is that the studio goes, oh, you don't want to miss this installment that's hitting theaters because this party train's going to keep on going, and you want to make sure that you stay on it. Or I guess in this case, when it comes to the Jurassic Park, theme park, the Jurassic Park monorail. Although we've seen from the latest trailers that it is off the rails, it's crashed, and perhaps Universal feels that's what's happened to its franchise. Because some of you feel it's almost, because, without bringing J.A. Bayona back, right? They're like, oh yeah, J.A. Bayona, we're going to leave him after this one. Some of you are thinking that it's almost like Universal is saying, hey, don't worry, we're going to get the magic back of the first Jurassic World after this slight, unfortunate detour. Now, I have to say, I agree with you. That is the vibe that they're obviously unintentionally putting out. They want to make it seem like the party train's going to keep on going, but I think that too much focus on Jurassic World 3 paired with surprisingly little focus on Jurassic World 2, it does make it seem like this is exactly what's happening. Now, as for J.A. Bayona, he is a very artistic, independent-minded director. Maybe he doesn't want to return. Maybe he's like, one and done. I want to go off to my next great artistic adventure. That would be fine. That would be understandable, although they would want him to say that publicly before the movie comes out, right? But I think that on that note, the same independent experimental streak could indeed have proven to be problematic for Jurassic World 2, and now Universal is worried with what they've ended up with. Like J.A. Bayona's like, look what I did, and they're like, oh my God, look what you did. Because I think whatever the Jurassic Park movies have a darker tone, they just don't work out as well. I mean, we'll see soon enough when the movie comes out, but it is coming out in about 2 months, I believe, mid-June, and they should be promoting it a lot more than they are. I think they certainly were promoting the first Jurassic World a lot more heavily at this point, and I think there is some cause for concern. But again, we'll see. I'm curious, what do you think? And are you happy that Colin Trevorrow is coming back? I don't know. He's still, I feel like he hasn't left because he's still a producer of this middle installment, so I don't know if he's actually necessarily going to be able to fix it. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is that yesterday, not only was it Easter, but it was also April Fool's Day. And it's always difficult to navigate social media on April Fool's Day. I think the pranks were toned down a bit because it was, again, a very religious weekend, and people maybe felt that it wasn't appropriate to do huge jokes on Easter. But there was still some shenanigans. For instance, Seth Rogen started a very funny campaign for his Netflix charity comedy special, which begins airing on Saturday. He had a funny bit where where Netflix acquired him as a person. It was very funny. But overall, social media is no joke in Hollywood, because sometimes it's a tiebreaker when deciding who to cast in a movie, or it's able to keep a career alive despite weak box office numbers. Now, there's The Hollywood Reporter every once in a while will keep tabs on who are the top people on social media. And they'll do it in different categories: actors, athletes, comedians, etc. And usually when it comes to actors, Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart are usually vying for the #1 spot. And it's usually going to Dwayne Johnson. He's very savvy when it comes to promoting himself online. But the reason we're talking about this today is that for the second week in a row, Will Smith has been the #1 actor on social media. And I'm so impressed with Will Smith's ability to, he has a very good business mind. So let me walk you through it. So what he's been doing is he's been very cleverly posting things that people must watch. Like, for instance, a clip of him salsa dancing with Mark Anthony, I believe, on a yacht. That's pretty amazing. In fact, I was talking about it with somebody yesterday, and they were like, I'd like to see that, actually. They're not a big internet person. And then over the weekend, this past weekend, he posted on his YouTube channel, I'll put a link to it down below, a comedy sketch that he did all by himself, where he went on a date with a robot, Sophia, and then he got friend-zoned during the date. A lot of funny gags in it, and it's actually, I think, a very well-written, well-acted, and well-produced comedy sketch. I think it was very nice. And he had a legit robot that he was on a date with. It was very ex machina. So I think that Disney must be thrilled, because he's the genie, of course, in their upcoming Aladdin movies. They're like, yes, Will Smith, continue to promote yourself. But also, he's heavily promoting another movie that he's working on, currently filming actually, called Gemini Man. And he's been posting a lot of videos from the set, which I've checked out. I think they're pretty amusing. That's directed by Ang Lee, himself in need of a comeback right now. And it's about an aging hitman, played by Will Smith, who must fight a younger clone of himself. So it's basically the storyline of Logan. But I'll see it. I mean, Will Smith is very clever. If you know your Will Smith history, he is someone who, when he decided to go from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to movies, he and his, his friends, basically his entourage, who were helping him out with career advice, they studied all the successful blockbuster box office hits, and they made his decisions on what movies to make based on that analysis. And for a very long time, it was very successful. I think he really only ran into trouble when he started to try and promote his kids. And at first, by the way, that was very successful as well. For instance, his Karate Kid remake with Jackie Chan and his son. For a while there, that was going very well. I don't know if you remember that Vanity Fair survey when they said, who would you like if you need someone to look after your kids? People picked Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith for that. They won that vote. So they were in a very good place for a long time now. It's hard to remember these days. Also, I think they've been accused of not being as supportive of the the Hollywood African American community, or the black community in Hollywood, as they could be. As that community, I think, gets more and more successful themselves, what once served the Smiths to distance themselves from them is now not so good. But we'll see. Maybe, hopefully, they'll try and reach out and be a little bit better members of their community. And I would be all for a Will Smith comeback. He was one of my favorite things in Suicide Squad. I think that, sure, he always kind of does the same thing, but he does it very well. And he's also, I think, a very good dramatic actor. If you've ever seen The Pursuit of Happiness, which also stars his son. I even thought Concussion was not bad. So I'm a big fan of Will Smith, and I'm impressed with his ability to rise like the phoenix from the ashes of his career that he burned down to the ground himself. All right, so that's the second story of the day. And I'm curious, what do you think of this from a business perspective? And what do you think of it from a fan perspective? Do you want to see Will Smith come back? Now, the third story of the day is a small story from late last week that I missed, but I came to my attention over the weekend, and I really want to discuss it because I'm becoming a Sebastian Stan fan. What did it? Was it Bucky? Well, while I am impressed with his hair in the upcoming Infinity War movie, what really made me a Sebastian Stan fan was his performance in I, Tonya. I think he did a great job. As I've said throughout the award season, I think that Sebastian Stan in I, Tonya, Michael Shannon in The Shape of Water, and Armie Hammer in Call Me By Your Name are the three most undervalued performances of last year. So I'm just happy that Sebastian Stan has found a way to move forward with none other than Leonardo DiCaprio, who is producing an adaptation of the novel Beat the Reaper, which DiCaprio himself was once going to star in, but now he's decided just to produce it. Now, DiCaprio doesn't have a great track record as a producer of material that he doesn't star in, but hopefully things will change because this is coming together pretty nicely. Now, the script is by Billions creators. I love Billions. The third season just started. I'm such a big fan. And Brian Kopelman and David Levien created that show on Showtime, and they have written the script here. And now DiCaprio has attached both a director and then Sebastian Stan to star. And the director is Gore Verbinski. I don't know about Gore Verbinski. I recently, Cure for Wellness was his last movie. I got the chance to interview him, and I think that while most of that film was very well made, I think by the end of it, though, it just completely fell apart, and I think there was a little bit of a taste issue there that I think that Gore Verbinski maybe crossed a line that he wasn't even aware of, and that's problematic. So I would worry a little bit about him, but hopefully DiCaprio will watch him like a hawk. But will he? I think DiCaprio is busy with his own career, so that concerns me. But anyway, if you haven't read the book, and maybe you'd like to before it becomes a movie, some people really like to read the book first, so go out and get it. It's about a mafia hitman who has started a new life as an ER doctor, but it all comes in danger of falling apart, and he himself comes in danger when a patient who comes into the ER recognizes him from his past life. That sounds pretty good. Actually sounds like a very good Leonardo DiCaprio movie, but we'll see how Sebastian Stan does in the role. With Stan, I have to say it feels a bit more like a streaming show or maybe a movie, and we'll see where it ends up. It's now out to, again, studios or aka distributors now that it's a complete package. And I can see maybe this ending up on Netflix Amazon doesn't really do so much movies these days, so I guess Netflix would be the best streaming home for it. But it seems pretty good. Hopefully they can bulk up the supporting cast to movie level, and that will bring the whole thing, including Stan, up to the next level. But how does this sound to you? What do you think of Sebastian Stan? I don't know if he's ready, quite frankly, for a leading role like this, but hey, the opportunity has presented itself. I definitely think he should take it and roll the dice. And I'll be rooting for him, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this film. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, the viewer question actually is follow-up questions from last week's viewer question about when films have double directors, duos. And so two of you actually were, a number of you were really intrigued by this, but these are the two follow-up questions that I picked for today. And the first comes from Leviticus James, who says, "Hey Grace, possible viewer question. Adding on to the directing duo conversation, I've noticed that most animated films have two directors. Is there any particular reason for this? Is it necessary? Best wishes from Colorado Springs." Hello, Leviticus James. Good question. Animation is very different. Now, sometimes there will still be a solo director in animation. For instance, Chris Wedge over at Blue Sky Studios, who tried to go to live action with monster trucks, but is now back at Blue Sky. He always directs solo. But for the most part, there's not just two directors, but sometimes three directors on an animated movie. And I think that's because there's just so much more to oversee. Think about it. Literally everything has to be created. It used to be drawn, now it's, digitally, envisioned. But, every single element on screen has to be made. So that's a huge team of people to oversee over a very long period of time. And so that's why you, I think, need multiple directors. Also, remember how animation is done. It's broken up into sequences, think back to the early days of Walt Disney, those photos, where everybody's looking at extremely detailed storyboards. Probably it's so detailed because everybody has to break off and go off to their respective corners to create the film, but everybody wants to make sure they're on the same storyboard, I guess, as to what the plan is. So everyone goes over it, everyone contributes. Animation is much more of a team effort, and that's why I think you can have a team of directors. And so that's the difference when it comes to animation. And again, it's very broken up into sequences, whereas a movie tends to have like one. I don't know. Animation has become a little bit more cinematic over the years, but still, there's musical numbers, and then there's gags. Because that's the way animation is done. It's a very different animal. All right, so the other question was that Gabby Runner for Life says, "Hey Grace, I'm glad you answered the viewer question that you did today because I've always had that same question. But I have a follow-up question if you could just answer here, please." I answered it in the video, Gabby, so good question. How do co-directors get paid? Is it more expensive to have co-directors because you pay them each what you would normally pay one? Or do they each get half of what a normal director would get? Thanks for answering. Love to watch your videos daily. Thank you, Gabby, and that is a great question. I think there might be slightly more because they are indeed splitting the salary, and the reps can negotiate for that. That's what the representative can say when they're in the room, being like, "I got two people here, they need to both make a living." And of course, there are other factors that they can negotiate with, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I think for the most part, the studio isn't going to be penalized because of how you like to work as a director. They're like, I'm not going to pay for 2 directors. I think particularly when you're starting your career, they're like, hey, if you want to work with a buddy, that's on you, and you're going to have to split the salary. Maybe I'll pay you a touch more so that it's a realistic living. I mean, there's scale. The DGA has scale, so they have to pay scale to each director, but they don't have to go beyond that. They're not entitled to. And so it's going to rely on the same negotiations that it would for any director. Is the talent a name? What's their experience? What's their ability to deliver? What's their track record? Like for instance, the Russos could ask for a lot more today than they when they were getting started in their pre-Marvel days. And then, of course, there's always the big question as to who needs this deal to go through more. The studio, because you're a name talent, a directing duo, like now the Russos today, or is it because the directing duo needs their big break, like the Russos when they started out? Then they're getting paid very little. But again, you can ask for a little bit more, and I think once you become a big name, they probably do have to pay you a significant amount more, but some directors can make quite a bit of money, and I don't think the studio will fully ever double that. The directors can maybe get some back end that they can split, but again, the studio is not going to pay for 2 people in what's a 1-person job slot fully. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's my answer to your question. James and Gabby, thank you so much, and everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories, James and Gabby's viewer questions, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and of course any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.